There's a woman who already trusts you, already enjoys your company, already thinks about you. And none of that is the problem. The problem is something quieter, something most men never think to look for because they are too focused on what they do not yet have to notice what is already there. You have been so close to this that you have probably felt it without being able to name it. That particular kind of conversation that ends and leaves you thinking about it longer than it should have. That moment where something felt different, warmer, more charged than usual, and then you convinced yourself you were imagining it. You were not imagining it. But here is what I want you to understand before we go any further. The reason you keep missing what is right in front of you is not a lack of effort. It is not a lack of feelings. It is that no one has ever explained to you the specific mechanism, the actual psychological process that moves a woman from enjoying your company to wanting something more from it. And without that understanding, you keep being present for the moments that matter without knowing how to enter them. There is a woman in your life right now who already has everything she needs to feel attracted to you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what is standing between where you are and where you want to be, and precisely what to do about it. She did not decide you were not attractive. She just never had a reason to decide you were. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. The concept of the friend zone has been discussed and debated so extensively that most men have started to accept it as a permanent verdict. A door that closes once and does not reopen. But that framing is not just unhelpful, it is psychologically inaccurate. Because the friend zone is not a place someone puts you. It is a relational pattern that forms in the absence of a specific emotional trigger. And patterns, by definition, can change. When a woman categorizes a man as a friend, what has actually happened is that her nervous system has filed him under a particular emotional label: safe, known, comfortable, non-threatening. That filing is not conscious. She did not sit down and make a list. It happened the way most of our emotional categorizations happen, automatically, through repeated experience over time. And the critical thing to understand is this: what formed gradually can be interrupted suddenly. That is not manipulation. That is how pattern recognition works in the human brain. The mistake most men make when they hear this is thinking it means to become someone else entirely, that they need to start acting distant, or start pretending they do not care, or suddenly become unavailable. That is not what this is. The shift we are talking about is far more specific and far more honest than any of that. It starts not with changing who you are, but with understanding exactly why the current dynamic has been misfiring, and why it has nothing to do with your value as a person. Before we get to exactly how you create this moment, you need to understand why your brain has been working against you every single time you were close to creating it. Everything you did to show her you were trustworthy, every time you showed up, every time you listened, every time you made it easy, those things built something real. Just not attraction. Not yet. Here is the neurological reality that most relationship advice completely ignores. Comfort and attraction are not the same emotion. They are processed in different parts of the brain, they feel different in the body, and they are triggered by different inputs. When you worked consistently to make her feel safe and comfortable around you, which you probably did because you genuinely care about her, you are feeding one system, a very important system, a system that produces trust, warmth, and genuine affection. But attraction requires something that comfort, by its nature, removes. Attraction requires a small, manageable degree of uncertainty. Not anxiety, not fear, just the quiet neurological question, what happens next with this person? When a man removes all uncertainty in order to feel safe, in order not to risk anything, in order to make sure she never feels pressured, he accidentally removes the very ingredient her nervous system needs to register a pull toward him. Behavioral researchers have observed this pattern extensively in long-term friendship dynamics that shift into romance. The shift almost never happens because one person simply decided to feel differently. It happens because something occurred that briefly made the relationship feel unknown again. Not unsafe, just unresolved. That unresolved quality is what the female brain interprets as possibility. Of course, this does not mean you should introduce chaos or instability into a friendship you value. Context always matters here. What it means is that you have been so focused on being the answer to every question she has about you that you have accidentally left no questions open. And it is the open question, the one she has not yet answered for herself, that keeps you in her thoughts in the way that matters. The most common mistake men make at this stage is believing that more of the same behavior will eventually produce a different result. That if they are kind enough, available enough, present enough, eventually something will shift. But neurologically, that is not how the female attraction system responds. More comfort produces more comfort. What produces something different is what we are about to get to. The 3 minutes is not a trick. It is a window that exists in every close relationship. A moment when her nervous system briefly asks, "Wait, do I actually know how I feel about him?" Now you might be thinking, 3 minutes sounds very specific. Is this actually measurable? And the honest answer is that the number is approximate. What is not approximate is the mechanism. There is a window of emotional recalibration that exists in human relationships. A period, brief but real, when a new input causes the brain to briefly reevaluate an established pattern. Neuroscientists describe this as a prediction error response. Her brain has built a model of who you are and how you behave. When something you do does not match that model, not in a threatening way, but in an unexpected way, the brain pauses, briefly. And in that pause, recategorization becomes possible. That pause is the window, and it does not stay open long. Think back to a conversation that once seemed ordinary, one where you walked away without realizing what had actually just happened. The window was probably open then. The inputs were probably present, but without knowing what to do inside the window, most men either stay still, continuing to behave exactly as they always have, or they overreach, saying something too direct, too heavy, too soon. Both close the window. One closes it quietly, the other closes it loudly. What keeps the window open is not what most men assume. It is not a grand declaration. It is not a perfectly timed compliment. It is something subtler and more powerful than either of those. I will show you exactly what that is in a moment. But first, there is something critical you need to understand about the gap between what you are trying to communicate and what she is actually receiving. You have been sending the message. She has been receiving it. The problem is not the signal strength. It has been arriving in the wrong language. Women do not process attraction the way men assume they do. Men tend to think in terms of explicit communication. I showed her I care. I was there when she needed me. I told her she looked beautiful. These are real things. They land somewhere. But the place they land is the comfort system, not the attraction system. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else in this conversation. What the female attraction system responds to is emotional subtext, the unspoken layer beneath the words. When a woman is with a man she is potentially attracted to, she is reading dozens of signals simultaneously that have nothing to do with what he is saying. She is reading how he holds himself when he is not performing for anyone. She is reading whether he has opinions of his own that he does not soften to match hers. She is reading whether he is fully present with himself or whether his entire emotional orientation is outward, toward managing her comfort, toward making sure she is okay, toward securing her approval. That last one is the silent relationship killer. When a man's entire emotional energy is directed outward, toward her, it communicates something her nervous system reads before her conscious mind catches up. It communicates that he does not have a stable internal world of his own. And a man without a stable internal world does not register as someone she can be drawn toward. He registers as someone who needs something from her. And that subtle reading, which she may never articulate, even to herself, is what keeps the dynamic locked. The shift is not in what you say. It is in something much smaller and much harder to fake. Here is what the 3-minute window actually looks like. Not in a movie, not in a script, in a real conversation you have probably already had the setup for without realizing it. The shift involves 3 elements. They do not need to be delivered in sequence. They do not need to be announced. What they need is to occur within the same natural interaction, close enough together that her nervous system registers them as a single new pattern. The first element is genuine self-disclosure, not vulnerability dumping, not an emotional confession that places weight on her and requires her to respond. Something much quieter than that. A moment where you let her see a part of your interior life that she has not had access to before. An opinion that is distinctly yours. A perspective that surprises her slightly. A moment where you reveal that there is more happening inside you than she has been allowed to see. This does not need to be dramatic. It might be as simple as telling her something you find genuinely moving about something she would not have predicted. The point is that it is honest, it is specific, and it is not calibrated to her approval. The second element is the pause. After that self-disclosure, do not fill the silence. Let the moment exist. This is harder than it sounds because most men who care deeply about a woman are trained, almost reflexively, to smooth over any moment of potential awkwardness. But that silence is not awkward. That silence is her brain processing something new. If you fill it immediately, you close the window before it opens fully. If you let it breathe, you give her nervous system the space to ask the question it needs to ask. The third element is an unambiguous signal of interest. Not a confession, not a question that demands an answer right now, not anything that applies pressure or requires her to make a decision in real time. Just a clear, calm, low-pressure indication that you see her differently than you see other people in your life, and that you are not afraid of that fact. This can be delivered in a single sentence, sometimes in fewer words than that. The key is that it is direct without being heavy, warm without being needy, and offered without any visible attachment to how she receives it. These 3 elements, delivered within the same natural interaction, create the pattern interruption her brain needs to briefly reevaluate the category she has placed you in. That reevaluation does not produce instant results. It plants something. And what grows from that planting depends entirely on what you do in the hours that follow. She is not going to announce that something shifted. She is barely going to acknowledge it to herself, but she will send you one signal, and now you are going to know exactly what it looks like. But before we get to that final signal, the one most men not only miss but actually misinterpret as a bad sign, there is something critical about the 24 hours immediately after the window that determines whether what you planted grows or quietly disappears. The window closing does not mean it did not work. Sometimes it means it worked exactly the way it was supposed to, and now she needs something from you that has nothing to do with saying anything. After the window interaction, her nervous system enters a brief recalibration period. What happens during this period is not indifference. It is internal processing. She may go quieter than usual. She may respond to your next message a little more slowly. She may seem slightly less eager to fill the conversational space between you. If you do not understand what this is, it reads like retreat. And retreat, to a man who has just made himself emotionally visible for the first time, feels terrifying. This is where most men undo everything the window just created. The instinct is to reach back, to check in, to ask if everything is okay, to send the message that returns the dynamic to familiar ground, which is the comfortable, available, non-threatening version of yourself that the pattern interruption was specifically designed to move away from. When you do that, when you re-enter the comfort role within hours of leaving it, you do not just miss the opportunity. You confirm to her nervous system that the version of you she saw in the window was temporary. That the man who was present with himself, who let silence breathe, who made his interest known without needing a response, that man was a performance, not a reality. The 24-hour recalibration period asks one thing from you: stay where you were. Remain as you were during the window, present with yourself, not anxiously monitoring her for signs of how she feels. This is not distance. You are not going cold. You are not disappearing. You are simply continuing to be the version of yourself that opened the window in the first place. Remember what I told you at the start, that there was a specific shift most men never create because they mistake familiarity for connection. We are at the last layer of that now. After successful recalibration, women send a specific, understated signal that men consistently misread as indifference or disinterest. She becomes slightly quieter around him, slightly more self-conscious, and slightly less eager to fill conversational space herself. This is not withdrawal. This is internal attention. When a woman is simply comfortable with someone, she is expansive. She talks easily, she fills silence naturally. She is relaxed in the way you are relaxed around someone whose impression of you is already settled. But when her feelings towards someone have begun to shift, when she is now, for the first time, thinking about you rather than simply enjoying you, something changes in how she takes up space with you. She becomes slightly more deliberate, slightly more careful. Not cold, not distant, just more considered in how she presents herself. Pay attention to these specific changes when you see them together. Her eye contact becomes slightly more sustained, not longer in a single look, but more intentional in how she returns to your eyes mid-conversation, as though she is checking something. Her physical responses slow down slightly. She does not laugh immediately. She holds the moment a beat longer before she responds. And perhaps most tellingly, she becomes more physically aware of herself in your presence. A small adjustment of posture, a moment of noticing her own hands, a slight pause before she speaks that was not there before. These are not signs that you have made her uncomfortable. These are signs that she is now uncertain about her own feelings in a way she was not before. And that uncertainty, that quiet, internal question she is sitting with, is exactly what attraction feels like in its earliest stage. Now, you might object here. You might be thinking, could she not simply be distracted, having a bad day, pulling back for some other reason entirely? And the honest answer is yes. One instance of this behavior means very little. What you are looking for is a cluster of these changes occurring together, consistently, in the interactions that follow the window. When the quietness, the deliberate eye contact, and the physical self-awareness all appear together, And when they appear specifically in your presence and not uniformly in how she engages with everyone around her, then you are reading signal, not noise. That is the moment most men walk away from without realizing it. Everything we have covered in this video points toward one unified truth. She does not need you to become someone else. She does not need more evidence that you are a good person. What she needs is to experience a version of you that she has not fully seen yet, the version that has an interior life, that can sit in silence, that can make its interest known without requiring anything in return. That version of you already exists. It has just been obscured by the habit of making her comfortable at the expense of making yourself real. The friend zone was never a judgment. It was a gap between who you are and what she has been allowed to see of you. The 3-minute window is not about technique. It is about finally letting the distance between those two things close. You do not need to analyze every conversation from this point forward. You do not need to rehearse lines or engineer moments. What you need is to carry what you now understand into the natural interactions you are already having, and trust that when the window appears, you will recognize it, and you will know what to do inside it. Tell me this in the comments. Is there a woman in your life right now who you think might already be sending that last signal, and you have been second-guessing yourself about it? Write window if the answer is yes. I read every one. If this channel gives you something you have not found explained this clearly anywhere else, the subscribe button is right there. Because the next video goes somewhere most men find even harder to look at. In the next video, I am going to show you the one behavior women interpret as emotional weakness in men they actually want to be attracted to. And the frustrating part is it is usually the behavior men think is making them look strong. That one goes up soon. Do not miss it.